The sun was setting over the village of Okudili, painting the skies in hues of orange and gold. In the distance, children played by the riverbank, their laughter echoing through the trees. But within the confines of a simple, yet beautiful home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Amina sat at the edge of her bed, gazing at the floor. The walls of their small home felt like they were closing in on her. The silence in the room was deafening, and in that silence, her heart broke. She had known for weeks. His behavior, the late nights, the whispers behind her back, she had seen the signs, but she had waited. She had waited for him to come clean, for him to confess, for him to make things right. But he didn't. Instead, Jamal, her husband, had been caught in his lies. The evidence had been undeniable: an unfamiliar woman's name etched on his phone, his promise of business trips, which turned out to be nothing more than excuses. His affair with Neka, a woman from the neighboring village, was the final blow. Jamal entered the room with his usual swagger, but something was different today. The confident smile he wore on his face, the one he thought could mask his guilt, was nowhere to be found. Instead, his eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Amina," he began, his voice low, almost apologetic, "there's something we need to talk about." Amina remained silent, her gaze never leaving the floor. Her heart, though shattered, remained steady, calm, and unyielding. She had been waiting for this moment, for him to finally admit the truth. But when he spoke, the words stung like a whip across her soul. "I've been seeing someone else," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over now, I swear." But it happened. Amina's heart sank, but she did not show it. She lifted her head slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time in days. Her eyes, though tearful, reflected a quiet strength, an inner resolve that Jamal had never seen in her before. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady, almost calm. "Why, Jamal?" He looked at her, guilt and regret washing over him, but there was no excuse he could give that would heal her wound. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt hollow. Amina stood up from the bed slowly, walking past him without a word. She went to the window, her back to him. The silence stretched between them like a thick rope that neither dared to touch. "I loved you," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "But you lost my trust, Jamal. And I will never be the same again." For the first time in years, Jamal felt the weight of her words, the coldness in her tone, the finality of her silence. It was more powerful than any argument or heated confrontation. It was the silence of a woman who had given everything, only to be betrayed by the one she trusted most. And now, that silence was her power. Days passed, and the village carried on with its usual rhythms, but within the home of Amina and Jamal, everything had changed. The warmth that once filled their house had turned to an icy chill. Jamal tried, in his own way, to apologize, to seek her forgiveness, but Amina remained distant. She did not shout, she did not cry, but she did not forgive. Amina's silence was her weapon. She made no effort to break it, even as Jamal continued to beg. She knew the truth, his actions were irreversible. He had shown his true self, and there was no going back. But something inside Amina was stirring, a decision that would change the course of her life. She had loved Jamal with everything she had, but now she realized that she loved herself even more. She had been drowning in the promises he made, in the lies he told, but now, she was learning to breathe on her own. The strength she had been seeking was already inside her, it had always been there, waiting. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, Amina made a decision. She gathered her belongings, packed a small bag, and left without a word. Jamal, who had been waiting for her to speak, was left in silence once again. The truth of his betrayal echoed in the walls of their home. But this time, It was not Amina's silence that pained him, it was the silence of a woman who had walked away from him, choosing herself over the lies he had woven around them. Amina left Okudili, moving to a nearby town where she found work and a new place to call home. Life wasn't easy, but it was hers. She made new friends, people who saw her for who she truly was, not the woman who had been defined by the mistakes of her past. With every passing day, the pain of betrayal lessened, and her strength grew. But deep down, there was still a lingering question: could she ever truly forgive Jamal? Months went by, and life seemed to be moving forward for Amina. But in the quiet of the night, her thoughts often drifted back to the home she had left behind, to the man who had once been her world. She had closed that chapter, but the pages still called out to her. One day, Jamal appeared at her doorstep, looking older, worn down by the regret he carried. His clothes were wrinkled, and his face was etched with sorrow. He had changed, but Amina wasn't sure if it was enough. "Amina," he began, his voice shaky, "I've made a mess of everything. I've lost you, and I don't know how to fix it. But I need to ask for your forgiveness." Amina stood at the door, looking at him with a mixture of pity and anger. She had given him everything, and now, here he was, asking for something she could no longer give him. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that had been absent before. For the first time, Jamal wasn't asking her to forgive him for his mistakes, he was asking her for the chance to prove that he could change. Amina's heart was torn. Could she ever truly forgive him? Was it possible to rebuild what had been destroyed? And was love enough to heal the wounds of betrayal? As the door creaked open, she took a deep breath, her silence speaking louder than any words she could utter. And in that moment, the real question was, would she give him a second chance? But only the beginning of a new story. Amina stood in the doorway, staring at Jamal. The years of hurt, of lies, of broken promises, all of it seemed to weigh heavily on her heart. But there was something different in his eyes today, a raw honesty that she hadn't seen before. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Jamal said quietly, his voice breaking. "But I need you to know, from the depths of my soul, that I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I was selfish, blind, and a fool. I made you feel unworthy, when you were nothing but everything to me." Amina closed her eyes for a moment. The silence between them hung like a heavy curtain, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She had come so far. She had healed, found her strength, and rebuilt her life without him. The question wasn't whether she could forgive him, the question was whether she could trust him again. "Why now?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why after everything, Jamal? After all the lies, the betrayal, why come to me now?" Jamal's gaze softened. "Because I finally understand what I lost. I can't undo the past, Amina. I can't erase what I did, but I want to show you that I'm not the same man who left you in that silence. I want to be someone you can trust again. But I know that's something I have to earn." Amina felt a pang in her heart, a mix of longing and resentment. The years of memories, the love she had once shared with him, all of it swirled in her mind. She had been left to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart, and now he was standing here, asking for a second chance. But was she willing to take the risk again? "Time changes things, Jamal," Amina said, her voice steady but firm. "But people change too. And the question isn't about whether you've changed. It's about whether I have. I don't know if I can trust you again, and I don't know if I should." The words hung in the air, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't that they didn't have anything left to say, it was that they both knew that the words alone wouldn't be enough. There was too much at stake now. Too much pain to erase. Jamal took a deep breath. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. To wait. To prove it to you, slowly. If you'll let me." Amina shook her head slightly. She was tired of waiting. Tired of hoping. She had spent years waiting for him to change, to become the man she had hoped he would be. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped believing in the fairy tales, in the dream of happily ever after. Maybe we don't need to go back to what we had, she said softly. Maybe we need to let go of the past, and start again. Not as the people we used to be, but as the people we've become. Maybe then, just maybe, we can build something new. Jamal's eyes widened slightly as he processed her words. A new beginning, he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Amina nodded. A fresh start. But only if we are both willing to try. To really try. No lies. No secrets. Just truth. Over the next few months, Jamal did everything he could to prove that he was a man worthy of Amina's trust. He was there when she needed him, never once trying to rush her into forgiveness. Every small act, every gesture, no matter how insignificant it seemed, was a step toward rebuilding what they had lost. But Amina remained guarded. She saw the changes in him, the effort he made, but her heart was still cautious, afraid of being hurt again. She had allowed herself to heal, to become independent, and the idea of letting someone back into her heart, especially someone who had shattered it before, was terrifying. Yet, with each passing day, she felt the walls she had built around herself slowly start to crack. She wasn't sure if it was the years of hurt finally fading, or if it was the quiet understanding between them that had begun to form anew. But something in her began to shift. She wanted to believe again. She wanted to let herself love again. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Jamal and Amina sat on the porch of her new home. The breeze blew gently through the trees, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Amina, Jamal said, his voice quiet and full of emotion, I know I hurt you. I can't take it back. But I want to be here, with you, in whatever way you need me. Amina looked at him, her eyes soft. She had been watching him for so long, waiting for the moment when she could finally feel whole again. She took a deep breath, then reached out to take his hand. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of letting you in, of opening my heart to you again. But I can't keep running from the possibility that we might have a chance. A real chance. Jamal squeezed her hand gently, his heart swelling with hope. I'm not asking for everything all at once. I just want the chance to show you that we can be better. Together. Amina looked at him, her gaze steady. Then let's take it one step at a time. But as the months passed, and Amina began to trust him again, a shadow loomed over their newfound peace. A woman from Jamal's past, a woman who had once been the cause of their downfall, suddenly reappeared, bringing with her secrets that Jamal had buried long ago. Amina could feel the storm brewing, but this time, she wouldn't face it in silence. She had learned that silence might be powerful, but speaking her truth was even more so. What was Jamal hiding? And would Amina's newfound strength be enough to face the consequences of the past, or would it tear them apart once again? The moon hung high in the sky, casting its soft glow over the village. It had been weeks since Amina and Jamal had begun their tentative journey back to one another. Their days were now filled with quiet moments of reconciliation, tentative laughter, and the rebuilding of a bond that had been broken. But Amina could feel it, the pressure, the unspoken tension that weighed on them both. They were not fully free yet. There was still something that neither of them had confronted. Jamal's past had resurfaced in the most unexpected of ways. A woman named Linda, someone from Jamal's earlier life, had shown up in their town. Amina had heard rumors, whispers among the villagers, of the history they shared, a history that was clouded in secrets. The woman's presence, though brief, was enough to stir up all the old doubts Amina had buried deep within her heart. It had started with a simple phone call. Amina overheard it one evening as she stood in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Jamal's voice, though soft, carried a note of urgency that immediately caught her attention. "Linda, I told you, there's nothing left. Amina doesn't need to know about you. Please, don't bring up the past. Amina's heart skipped a beat. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Linda was a figure from Jamal's past that had never truly been laid to rest. And she also knew that this conversation wasn't the first of its kind. There had been others, hidden behind closed doors, whispered in shadows. That night, Amina couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What was Jamal hiding? What was he not telling her about Linda? The silence between them, though filled with good intentions and mutual respect, was slowly turning into a barrier she couldn't ignore any longer. The next morning, as the sun rose in its usual brilliance, Amina made a decision. She had been silent for so long, allowing Jamal to lead the conversation, to steer their relationship on his terms. But this time, she would be the one to confront the truth. She found him in the living room, sitting by the window, staring out at the landscape as though lost in thought. His face, usually so confident, looked worn. His shoulders slumped, weighed down by something only he knew. "Jamal," Amina called softly, her voice steady but firm. He turned to face her, his expression darkening slightly. "Amina, Tell me about Linda," she cut in, her voice low but clear. "Tell me what she means to you. Because whatever this is between us, whatever you and I trying to build, it can't happen unless the truth is out in the open." For a moment, Jamal was silent, his gaze avoiding hers. Then he stood slowly, walking over to her. He reached out to touch her arm, but Amina stepped back, needing space, needing to hear the truth. "Amina," Jamal began, his voice breaking, "Linda, she's part of my past. She was someone I thought I could build a life with. But we both made mistakes. And I walked away from that chapter. I chose you. I chose us. And I thought that was the end of it." Amina's eyes hardened as she listened. "And then she shows up again, just when we're trying to rebuild. Just when things are starting to feel real." Jamal's eyes filled with guilt. "I never wanted her in our lives. I swear to you. But the past, Amina, it has a way of catching up with you. I didn't want to bring it up, because I didn't want to lose you. But you deserve the truth. All of it." Amina could feel her heart breaking again. She had given him everything. She had loved him despite everything. But was this truly the end of it? Could she trust him completely? "You've kept things from me, Jamal. And it's not just about Linda. It's the lies, the silence. How can I believe anything you say when the truth keeps slipping through your fingers?" Amina's voice quivered with the weight of her words. "How do I know you've really changed?" Jamal closed the distance between them, his eyes pleading. "Amina, I love you. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And if it takes me the rest of my life to prove that to you, I will. But please, don't let the mistakes of the past define us. Don't let my mistakes destroy the future we can have." Amina stood still, her emotions swirling within her. She was torn between the love she once felt for him, and the fear that she was about to be hurt all over again. But something in her shifted. She was stronger now, more aware of her own worth. And perhaps that was the real test, the test of whether or not she could trust herself to make the right decision, regardless of the love she still felt for him. "Jamal, I'm not asking for perfection," Amina said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking for the truth. All of it. If you can give me that, then maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild." Jamal nodded, his face pale with fear and hope in equal measure. "I'll tell you everything," he promised. "No more secrets. No more lies." But as Amina turned to walk away, her phone buzzed with a message, an unknown number, with a message that shook her to her core. "Amina, this is Linda. I have something you need to see." Amina froze, her heart pounding. The truth, it seemed, was only just beginning to unravel. Amina stood frozen in her place, her phone still buzzing in her hand. The message from Linda stared back at her, the words cutting through the silence like a knife. Amina, this is Linda. I have something you need to see. Her heart raced, her mind spinning with questions. She had thought the silence had been broken. She had thought they were finally on the road to healing. But now, it seemed as though the past was once again rising from the shadows, determined to tear apart the fragile piece they had built. Jamal stood behind her, watching her face go pale as she read the message. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her fingers tightened around her phone. Amina, what is it? Jamal asked, his voice filled with concern, but also a hint of panic. What did she say? Amina turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. Linda, she says she has something I need to see. Jamal's face hardened, his jaw tightening. He moved toward her, reaching out to take her hand. Amina, I swear to you, there's nothing more. It's over. Whatever she thinks she has, it's not the truth. But Amina wasn't sure if she could trust him anymore. The doubt had crept in, slowly at first, like a small crack in the foundation. And now, with Linda's message, that crack had widened into a chasm. Amina took a deep breath and looked at Jamal, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and resolve. I need to know the truth, Jamal. All of it. If you love me, then show me the respect I deserve. Tell me what's really going on. Jamal's eyes softened, but the guilt was still there, lingering beneath the surface. He nodded slowly, his voice quiet. I don't want to drag you into this mess, Amina. But if you need to know. Linda was part of a chapter one should have closed long ago. She wasn't just an affair, she was someone I thought I could build a future with. But I made the wrong choice. I left her because I realized you were the one I wanted. Amina swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving his. She was searching for the sincerity, for the honesty she had asked for. She had been looking for answers from the very beginning, and now they were finally being laid out before her. But what does she want now? Amina asked, her voice steady but edged with suspicion. Jamal's eyes flickered with uncertainty. I don't know. Maybe she's just trying to get back at me for ending things. Maybe she wants to cause trouble. But Amina, you have to trust me, there's nothing between us anymore. You're the only one I want. Please believe me. Amina stood silently for a long moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had given so much of herself to this relationship. She had loved him with everything in her heart, and she had been broken by his betrayal. But could she believe him now? Could she trust that he had truly changed? Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. I need to make a decision, Jamal. Not just for you, but for me. I've spent so long waiting for you to change, for you to prove yourself. But I've changed too. I'm not the same woman I was when I met you. I've learned that love isn't enough to hold everything together. Trust is. Jamal took a step closer, his eyes pleading. Amina, please. I love you. I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you. Amina's heart wavered, but her resolve remained. She had spent too many years in silence, too many years doubting herself. The power to choose her own future had always been within her grasp, and now, it was time to take control. I can't give you my heart until I can trust you again, she said softly. But I won't stay in this relationship just because it's comfortable. I will not be someone's second choice. If we are going to move forward, we have to do it honestly. And you have to let me go, if that's what it takes. Jamal's face crumpled with the weight of her words. I understand, Amina. I know I've hurt you more than anyone should. But I'm willing to fight for you. I'll wait for as long as it takes. Amina nodded, her heart heavy. She knew the road ahead would be long, filled with uncertainty and difficult choices. But for the first time in a long while, she felt the power to choose for herself, to step into her future, whatever it may be. She took a deep breath, then turned toward the door, ready to face the future with or without him.